Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And this fortnight, we'll be discussing Turning Red, the new Disney Pixar movie, which is just like the Hulk, except instead of turning into a big green monster, this teenage girl turns into a red panda. And then we'll be talking about The Boys presents Diabolical. You have to do the voice, really. The animated anthology collecting a series of shorts set in the world of The Boys. That is, of course, the Amazon superhero bashing TV show. But before all of those things, Alistair, what else have you consumed in the last fortnight?
Well, I've been doing my annual tradition of watching all the Oscar films, or at least as many as I can, to try and see what's good and what's likely to win at this year's awards. I think by the time you're listening to this episode, the awards will have taken place, so you will know the winners if you care, whereas I currently do not. The interesting thing about this year is just how wide open many of the categories are. There's 10 Best Picture nominees. There's no films that are really dominating across the nominations. There's no kind of clear front runner. Many of the categories are just completely wide open, so there could be room for a lot of surprises on the night. My recommendation of them, I love Dune, and obviously the book and the film has a special place in my heart, and we discussed it on the podcast, but aside from Dune, I really enjoyed Coda. I think that is a film that's not been talked about enough and appreciated enough. It's very good, about a teenage girl who can hear but the rest of her family is deaf and she wants to become a singer. It's a quite sweet, nice little story starring Emilia Jones, who you might know from the Lock and Key adaptation that's on Netflix. Yeah, she got a BAFTA nomination. One of her co-stars has got an Oscar nomination. It also stars Marley Martin, who you may know as Joey Lucas on The West Wing. So yeah, nice to see her again. There's a lot of other good films. Drive My Car, this year's token, not in the English language, Best Picture nominee. It was very good. It's 3 hours long and it's very sad, but I thought that was excellent. Yeah, there's quite a wide variety of stuff. The one film I really didn't get on with was West Side Story, the remake that's almost the same as the original, thus being completely pointless. I don't know why they remade a film that's already a perfectly good version of. But yeah, it's an interesting year.
Yeah, no, I didn't see the point in remaking West Side Story either, or at least I didn't see the point if they're not going to make some kind of, improved, better version, which it does not sound like they've done. I mean, I watched the original over Christmas at my partner's house because it was on one of the channels, I guess, as a tie-in to this new version. And yeah, I still really like that film. I watched that film a lot when I was a kid. I hadn't realised quite how much of it I basically knew by heart. It was strange seeing it again. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's made much of a splash beyond people expressing confusion at the pointlessness of it.
Yeah, I hadn't actually seen the original West Side Story. It was a gap in my film knowledge. So I watched the original and then waited about a week to let it sink in before I watched the remake. And watching them close together, you do see how similar they are. It's all the same songs, all the same events. It's just really bizarre they made it so similar. If they'd updated it to be present day or come up with some other twist on it, maybe there'd be some merit to this, but I really don't understand why remaking something that there's already a very good version of.
Yeah, no, baffling to me. So yeah, I haven't seen the new one, but it doesn't sound like it's going to win. Is Power of the Dog still seen as a broad favourite? Is that still seen as a likely big winner?
I think if there is a front runner, it is Power of the Dog. It's got quite a wide range of nominations. It did very well at the BAFTAs, so that's probably a sign that it's in the lead. In fact, if I was going to make some predictions, I think I would say that The Power of the Dog will win Best Picture, probably Jane Campion Best Director. I can imagine it probably win Best Cinematography as well. So it'll probably, I think, do the best amongst the big categories. I wouldn't be surprised if the film that wins the most Oscars is Dune, because it'll probably sweep the technical categories, so it might actually end up with the most wins on the night. But it's not really nominated in many of the big categories, apart from Best Picture, I think Best Cinematography and Best Adapted Screenplay. Power of the Dog definitely a front runner. This might be Will Smith's year to win Best Actor. If it's not him, then it'll be Benedict Cumberbatch for Power of the Dog.
I see Andrew Garfield's nominated for Tick, Tick, Boom. I'm not sure if that's an Oscar bait performance, but I did really enjoy it.
It was good. And again, the category is quite wide open. Maybe he will get it. It's impressive that he learned to sing and dance for that role. So you never know. There are a lot of ones out there. In terms of a Best Supporting Actor, I think it might go to Troy Kotsur, who was in Coda, plays the main character's dad, and he is brilliant in that film. And there is some buzz around Coda winning Best Picture. That might happen, but I think if it's going to walk away with something on the night, it might be Best Supporting Actor. Troy won Best Supporting Actor at the BAFTAs as well. I think Olivia Colman might get her second Oscar as Best Actress for The Lost Daughter, which is an interesting quite dark film, but I did enjoy. Best Supporting Actress, I'm going to choose Judi Dench for Belfast, which is a film that, although good, I don't know, it was entertaining, but it did kind of do sort of a very traditional coming-of-age story. It kind of ticked all the tropes in that category, so it wasn't an amazing film. But Judi Dench was very good, so she might win Best Supporting Actress, so that's a possibility. And then, probably Drive My Car, Best Foreign Language Film, Summer and Soul for Best Documentary. Those are my tips for the night.
A lot of those categories I haven't seen enough of the nominations to really make an informed judgment. I hope Don't Look Up doesn't win anything, because my annoyance with that film continues. I note I've seen 2 of the Best Animated Feature Film nominations, specifically Luca and The Mitchells vs. the Machines. I haven't seen the other 3, so it's a low-value judgment, and, I gather people like Encanto, but I personally hope The Mitchells vs. the Machines wins, because that film was great.
Yeah, I would love it if The Mitchells vs. the Machines won. I think that was in my top 5 films of last year. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, Encanto is very popular. It's also got the advantage of it's, I think, the most recent one to be released, apart from Flea. So, yeah, it's probably likely to be Encanto, I think, on sheer momentum. Although I do really want to watch Flea, which is nominated in Best Documentary, Best Animated Film, and Best Foreign Language Film. So it's got the trifecta of, we're not going to nominate you for Best Picture. Here's a sympathy category.
Well, yeah, that is a lot of things to get nominated without getting Best Picture.
Yeah. The other one that I really enjoyed, which is the Best Foreign Language Films, is The Worst Person in the World, sort of millennial romantic comedy based in Norway. That is really funny and quite moving, so I would recommend that.
Okay, well, listeners, you by now will know whether Alistair was right. I may or may not have managed to insert funny sound effects under his predictions to tell you whether he was right.
Well, do get in touch with your views on the night, and I'm excited to see what happens. So that's what I've been up to recently. Nick, what have you been doing since we last spoke?
Well, I have been listening to another exciting new music release. This is, yes again, from one of the legacy bands, the bands I've liked for a long time and have kept up with through winter and through summer, ironically, through good albums and bad, and very much so in the case of this particular band, as yes, we're back on Weezer, who have released what's actually the first in a series of EPs they're doing this year in a new concept project. It's called Seasons, which is of course stylized SZNZ, Seasons. I can only assume they're insisting on this weird format so that fans don't start calling it Weezons. But anyway, they're releasing 4 EPs this year, one for each of the seasons of the year. So obviously, yes, on the spring equinox, I think it was, last Sunday, they released the spring EP of this series, and the next one comes out in about 3 months, and the final one will come out, I believe, in sort of mid-late December for winter. So yeah, this is a spring-themed EP from Weezer, and it's good in a sense that it's very much on the assignment. He's very much taken this sort of Renaissance fair, la-la-la, springtime, green grass. He's literally dressed as an elf in the music video clip for this. He's very much taking this to its logical extreme. And the whole EP is kind of like that, this sort of running through the green grass to hug people. Spring is in the air, it's sunny outside. Unfortunately, it's actually been quite a nice week. The weather has actually been quite good. It has actually felt like the start of spring. So it's actually been quite a good time to listen to a spring-themed Weezer EP. And as I say, it does do its thing and make you feel springy. It does have the Weezer trademark of just being knowingly, loudly and unapologetically lame. Like,
I mean, that is the very apt description of Weezer.
Or possibly cringe, as I believe we're saying nowadays. But yes, he's very on the nose. There's not one but 2 songs about how much love is in his heart. One is called A Little Bit of Love and one is called All This Love. And as I say, it's... Yeah, it's very much about how he wants to run over and hug you. And there's another song about how much he loves Shakespeare, in which he just shouts, "Shakespeare makes me happy," quite loudly a few times.
Fair enough.
If you can't listen to this stuff without developing a full body cringe, you may struggle through this EP, but it is nice to see them embodying the season, I guess. It's quite fun. It made me smile. It may well make you cringe, but it made me smile.
I'm glad that Weezer are still putting out material and, trying out new things, as well as keeping to their roots of slightly cringe music. I mean, I remember back in, when they, broke through with things like the Sweater Song, their sound was very much grunge but happy. So rather than being like the nihilism of Nirvana, Weezer were that sort of sound, were a bit more upbeat. Has the sound, evolved since then? I know they did a heavy metal album or something at some point.
I think the sound has continued a bit like that with some variation. I mean, they seem to have got into this sort of concept album thing in the last couple of years. Like, in 2021, they did 2 albums, one of which was called OK Human and was kind of a chamber pop album with an orchestra, which was great, by the way. If you want to listen to one Weezer album from the last, honestly, entire second phase of their career. Basically one Weezer album, to be honest, since Pinkerton. They listened to OK Human. It's really good. And then they did another one called Van Weezer, which was their homage to like hair metal, I think. Like massive 80s hair metal.
Yeah, Van Halen.
Yeah, it's their homage to Van Halen and so on. And to be honest, that's not as good as OK Human. It just gets a bit repetitive after a while, but it is still very good, and they do really commit to it, so fair enough. And now they're doing this season's thing.
I guess when you get to be a sort of elder statesman of music like Weezer have, you can kind of do what you want. It's kind of like how Sting or Mark Knopfler now just kind of throws in like medieval folk music into like rock songs and things like that. So I guess once you get to a certain level of being around for a while and got a committed fan base, you can basically like, well, I do what I like.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they adapt their style for this season's project. Like, as I say, they've very much gone for it on the spring run with this sort of mandolin running through the grass type vibe. So I don't know whether that means that we're going to be in, I don't know, bright California surf rock for summer. Is winter going to be really depressing?
I can imagine the winter one could be quite grim, or I don't know.
It'd be interesting to see if he can find a way to do winter without just making, depressing music.
Maybe they'll just be Christmas songs.
Yeah, he could be. Autumn will just actually be a Halloween album, who knows?
Yeah, I can imagine the Californian sort of surf rock thing for summer would actually be quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, they did an album like that a few years ago, actually, the White Album, which actually was pretty good too. It's among the best of recent Weezer albums. So yeah, it's nice to see them being good again. There was a period, a long, long period, where every Weezer album was just a descent to a new low of cringe, without any sense that it was, fun or that there was a good tune. It was just kind of bad. I don't know, there seemed to be a period where they were trying a bit too much of the old trend following, of actually trying to be cool modern pop music. Again, I may be diving into deep Weezer fandom to an extent that many people cannot follow, but there was an album called Raditude, which they did in I think either the late 2000s or early 2010s, which I think is generally regarded as a bit of a career nadir. Yeah, it's just bad. It just features a lot of painful, this man who must be rocketing towards 50 is trying to be down with the kids. There's a song called The Girl Got Hot, which is very hard to get through.
Oh yes, I think I've heard that.
And another song called Can't Stop Partying with a guest rap by Lil Wayne, which is honestly getting into so bad it's good territory.
I mean, this was, I guess, the era that provided a lot of material for the Weezer brackets. Was it that podcast
Yes.
trying to find what is the worst Weezer song of all time?
Yes, this weird love-hate relationship that a lot of Weezer fans have with their music sort of culminated in the Weezer Bracket podcast that ran in, I think, again, the late 2010s. Yeah, where two dedicated Weezer fans decided to try and find the worst Weezer song through a 32 song bracket, doing each match-up one at a time. It's a good podcast, actually. I think you probably do need to have a baseline of familiarity with Weezer, but if you are a Weezer fan, then I can recommend the Weezer Bracket as an enterprise. Although Weezer have now released so many albums, I think at least 3, possibly 4 or 5, depending if you count that covers album they released, the Teal album, since the Weezer Bracket came out. So it's actually quite out of date at this point. But then again, a lot of the recent albums haven't actually been quite as laughably bad, so maybe there just wouldn't be that much material. For the record, apparently, according to the Weezer Bracket, the worst Weezer song is Beverly Hills.
I can believe that. That song is awful.
Part of me always feels that song gets cited as awful more than it deserves due to being overplayed, but yeah, it is pretty bad.
It's well known and bad, whereas I'm sure there are very obscure.
I think that's what the final bracket came down to, actually, the very last face-off. It was Beverly Hills versus, I want to say, In the Mall, which is an album track. And it's like, well, look, In the Mall is boring and shit and terrible, but Beverly Hills is big and obnoxious and terrible and was played everywhere for ages, and I just hate it more. I think is what the final bracket came down to.
I'm glad that Weezer are leaving this behind now with good music.
Yes, now that Weezer have made a few good records, if anything, it seems even funnier to reflect on the bad ones. So yeah, for the record, season spring. If you want some nice spring music for the new spring weather, it's actually really good. It's actually really on message for that. So yeah, as long as you can withstand a certain level of cringing, it's good stuff.
Next up, this episode, we will be reviewing Turning Red, the new Pixar film on Disney+. Mei Lee is a high-achieving 13-year-old girl living in Toronto in the early aughts. She does well at school, has a close circle of friends, and is dedicated to pleasing her parents, especially her mother. However, her world is shattered when Mei suddenly transforms into a giant red panda. This is revealed to be a family curse, and Mei's mother says she will help her bind the panda, but the panda's popularity and Mei's own wishes soon come into conflict with what her family wants. We saw this film recently. Nick, what did you think of it?
I thought this was great. I thought this was a lot of fun. It's obviously, kind of an extended puberty metaphor about, coming into your own and balancing what you want to be with what your family want you to be. But yeah, I thought it's a really fun way of doing it. There's a lot of good jokes. The central character is extremely memorable. I liked how rounded the central character's life actually felt, Some of these films, just due to sheer constraints on time, they have, one family member and one friend or something. But I actually thought like her life felt quite full. It felt quite like like a real person. She had this group of friends, she had people and acquaintances around her, she had an extended family and stuff. And I mean, it meant that this film's maybe a bit longer than some of these animations get, but I mean, it's not an epic. I think it's about an hour and 3/4. But yeah, it didn't feel long to me. It didn't feel like a slog. It was just fun from beginning to end. So yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. The animation is extremely cute and flexible, and yeah, I liked the way it mostly does this grounded stuff, but can still contain this panda right up to at the end, where I don't really feel the need to spoil the end of the film, but there's a lot of panda by the end of this film. As often happens in these films, the panda escalates, and it does build to it very nicely.
What I do love about this film is that it's now given us the use of the word panda as a verb, such as to panda all over the place. She's going to panda, a great addition to the English language. But yeah, no, I agree with all of that. It is a really sweet, nice story, just about friendship. The metaphor is right out there. It's about physical transformation, but also psychological transformation. It's one of those great coming of age stories when you realize you've got to be your own person and do what you want rather than doing what's expected of you or what your family wants. It's that real sense of, you can be a part of a community. In this case, there's sort of like Chinese emigre community living in Toronto, and respect that community and respect its wishes and your culture, but also you need to be your own person and follow your own path. And I think it's a very powerful message to send out. So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot to love in this film. It's just really sweet and nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed how they skirted the obvious plot quite quickly. There's not that long in this film where she's, on her own keeping the panda secret. I think that bit lasts about 5 minutes.
There's a few good jokes, around it, and then they kind of move on, yeah.
Yeah, she gets found out pretty quickly. It's an obvious thing to do with this setup, can she keep her feelings under control? And it felt quite fresh and interesting, but obviously they move past it pretty quickly. It's not just about her suffering alone, sobbing alone in her bedroom. In fact, don't get me wrong, there are some sobbing alone in her bedroom scenes, but they don't feel integral to the film. It's a lot more about, her actual healthy relationships with the people around her than just self-pity.
I mean, there's a lot going on in this film. Like I said, it moves through things quite quickly. There's obviously the main plot line of her turning into a panda, and then there's how, without spoiling it too much, May and her friends basically exploit the panda to make money by having the panda turn up at parties or have people photographed with the panda, because there's this other plot line which involves May and her friends' favourite boy band, who's very much in that kind of early aughts NSYNC Backstreet Boys style auto-tuned boy band, is coming to town, so they need to raise money for tickets for that. There's the plot line with May's mother, then they also introduce her aunts and May's grandmother, and there's the various dynamics going on there. There's a story involving friendship and falling out with May's friends. So there's a lot actually in this film. It's not hugely long, but it does all weave together quite well, and it hits the right emotional moments. Yeah, I mean, it works considering how many plates it's got spinning.
Yeah, but in terms of emotional moments, by general Pixar standards, it isn't quite as racked with floods of tears as they sometimes are. Pixar films that are tried a lot harder to make you cry than this. This actually is mostly just trying to be fun and uplifting and, emotional to the sense that you feel for the characters, but not emotional in the sense of, you come out of it completely vexed. This is no Inside Out or Toy Story 3.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is the stakes kind of feel a bit lower for this film. It's not about life or death. It's kind of more about relationships and, and family and things like that. And, a lot of the tension is around, will they get enough money to go see this boy band? Which, I think is refreshing that it's not trying really hard to aggressively press all your emotional buttons.
Well, yeah, people sometimes say about Pixar films, are these actually films aiming at entertaining children, or are they films aiming at making adults who are starting to feel their own mortality burst into tears? This did actually feel like a fun film aimed at a younger audience, and yeah, I mean, I'm not implicitly dissing those films, but I think it's nice and fun and refreshing, and I think fully works that this film is trying to do that.
I mean, setting it in the aughts means that there's, for people who are older, grown-ups with children, there's lots of nostalgia for them to there's references to everything from Tamagotchis to, again, the music of the time and things like that. So I guess there's a lot of nostalgia aimed at adults. I don't know how much the kids of today will understand the kind of how different things were back then. There's bits involving text messages appearing on flip phones and things. So I guess all that's for the grown-ups.
Yeah. Part of me found the aughts setting a bit weird. I guess the main thing it adds is that they don't have to deal with, the full global internet, which I guess would probably have changed the shape of the plot in quite a lot of meaningful ways.
Well, people don't have, camera phones yet.
Yeah, no camera phones, no posting videos on the internet, which would probably have been quite a big deal in this story. Yeah, maybe that's the main reason for the aughts setting. I also saw the director somewhere saying it was an important time to her personally.
Yeah, I get the feeling this film is sort of quite autobiographical. Although, weirdly, this is the first Pixar film to have a solo female director, which is crazy considering how many there's been. I think there was one film in the past that was co-directed by a man and a woman, but it's crazy that considering there are piles and piles of Pixar films, this is the first one that's spearheaded by a single woman. But yeah, and you can really get a sense that this is, autobiographical about her life growing up in that community. I mean, there are moments when modern vernacular creeps into the film. There's a bit when May says to someone on the bus, like, it's all about that hustle, which is much more of a modern expression. And there were a few others times when, like, slang from today was being deployed. Definitely at a time I don't remember it being used.
Yeah, as I say, I sometimes found the aughts setting a bit odd. I kept occasionally remembering this was taking place in the aughts, because to me, a lot of the time, I just sort of was just happily watching it as if it was taking place now, even though when I think about it, as I say, realistically, if global social media was involved, this story would have been very different, so it obviously isn't taking place now. But yeah, it's fun, it's an angle. Yeah, I agree with what you said about it clearly being, I don't know about autobiographical, but I liked the specificity of it, I guess. It felt like it was very much trying to talk about this culture and this person's life in some detail rather than making it as broad as possible to appeal to the widest number of people, children, possible merch buyers.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one thing I've discovered through writing myself is when you're writing or creating a character, there's a temptation to always make your character a generic every person. So like someone that everyone can relate to. Don't make them too specific. And there are a lot of films when basically there's like general person is basically the main character, someone like a sort of almost like a void for people to project personality onto. But I think good writing, people realize that people relate more to someone who feels like a real person and a real character, which requires details, specificity, as you say, having personality, culture, background. And even if it's very different to your own upbringing, like, I don't have much knowledge of what it was like to be a teenage girl of a sort of Chinese cultural background living in Toronto. It's not those are a list of things I've never been. But I could relate more to this character because she felt like a real person who went through, universal coming-of-age rituals, even though that also never turned into a giant panda. But you can relate to the character because they feel like a real person.
Yeah, exactly. The character was just very well built. In some ways, the character's she's not in some ways a huge, massive, show-offy, extroverty character, which actually makes it even more impressive how quickly the film, whatever this form of content is, makes her feel distinct and unique and with her own tics and her own personality traits and stuff. And yeah, there's a montage at the very beginning, I think, which introduces the character and does a really, really good job of making it clear why she's interesting and why she's special and making you like her. It's pretty masterful, to be honest. This is a really good film.
Yeah, definitely one of the stronger Pixar films I've seen for a while. I think the voice cast was excellent. Rosalie Chiang as the main character, who's, I don't think, done much acting. Her voicing May, she was excellent. Sandra Oh plays the mum, and yes, Sandra Oh is in so many great things, from Killing Eve to The Chair, and she was great in this. And I also really liked Wei Ching-hu, who voiced the grandmother and really gave that character personality. And you may recognise her if you've seen the film Hustlers. She also played the main character's grandmother in that. And these are two very different grandmother characters, but she kind of really gives them both a real personality.
Yeah, no, I liked when the grandmother turned up, actually, because again, talking about how, how much time and how much depth there is to the cast and the background on this film, it gets into not just the main character's relationship with her mother, but also her mother's relationship with her mother, which fills in a lot of why things have worked out the way they have, which is quite subtly shaded. There's not hours spent on this, but it's very nicely done.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's relating back to one of those moments that most people go through when you realise that your parents were young once, and, they weren't always your parents, they were like people in the past, and it is a weird, earth-shattering moment, and it's all wrapped up in the metaphor of people turning into giant pandas, and the panda is incredibly cute. Also, there's nothing more hilarious in animation than animals pulling human expressions, which they do a lot. So it's full of crazy, fun Disney/Pixar animated things, but it's never far from making a sort of universal point about childhood or growing up.
Well, yeah, it has a very sort of nice, knowing affection for teenagers. It's kind of clearly aware of some of the sillier or more excessive things that teenagers do, or the impulsiveness, the unwiseness. But I don't think it does it in a patronising way. I have not got a teenager handy to ask, but I don't think this is a film that teenagers will find patronising.
No, I think it's very accessible. I did also enjoy the anime references thrown in there. The animation style kind of leans more into anime a bit of times. Like they use speed lines, impact frames, the sort of big eyes for emotional impact. Just it was nice to see that kind of scattered in through the usual Pixar animation style.
Yeah, there's definitely, especially towards the end. But again, spoilers, I guess, but as we get towards the action sequences at the end, there's definitely a lot more sort of anime influence, and it's quite fun.
Yeah, so overall, I think this is a strong recommendation.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, I don't have a league table of recent Pixar films, but I have been watching them fairly regularly since they started helpfully putting them on Disney Plus in my house. And yeah, this is definitely one of my favourite ones recently.
Yeah, definitely my favourite one since Inside Out, which I did really, really enjoy.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed Luca last year. That was a nice, decent film, but I think this is an exceptional one. See this.
Finally, this episode, we will be discussing The Boys Presents Diabolical, a new animated show on Amazon Prime. This is an anthology show of animated shorts set in the universe of dark superhero show The Boys. The shorts are in a variety of different animation styles, and they expand the universe of The Boys while sticking to the original show's dark tone, violence, and nihilism about superheroes. We've seen the first series of 8 episodes, and like we have for previous anthology shows, we'll be choosing our top 3 episodes. But before that, Nick, what did you think of the show as a whole?
I thought these were all mostly kind of fun in a slightly disposable way. They do have the vague sense of bonus YouTube channel content rather than like an actual separate show. Although obviously I guess the talent and animation quality you're getting here is better than you probably would have got for random social media videos. So yeah, they're all mostly quite nice little short stories. Some of them are a bit straightforward, and I think there seems to be a bit of a tendency to fall back on the plot of some random gets Compound V. I mean, I guess it's the obvious thing to do in the Boys universe, but I swear at least half of these do it. But yeah, nonetheless, it's alright. And there is, I think I've said more than once of the difference between the comic and the TV show, that the comic is a bit more prone to real, like, sadistic shock value stuff, and the TV show made a bit more effort to, I don't know, nuance it up a tiny bit. And these, due to their short length, do seem to sometimes go, if anything, a bit further towards the sort of nihilistic violence.
Yeah, I mean, there's very much a tonal connection here to the main show, the sort of it's dark, it's violent. I feel that it's trying to be like a sort of provocative, in your face, like, you know, this is cartoon, but it's like quite disturbing and gory and violent, which is very much the tone of The Boys. And yeah, as you were saying, like probably the comic even more so. But some of it felt a bit like it's almost like a bit old fashioned. I remember like in the aughts, in the early days of YouTube, when things went viral, but kind of viral by word of mouth. Before Facebook, you had to be told about something to look it up on YouTube, and it kind of spread that way. And there was a vogue at the time for weird, out there, violent cartoons. There was Happy Tree Friends, or those things like Aqua Teen Hunger Force that were kind of dark, violent, usually quite disturbed. So in some ways it felt like a throwback to that. I mean, similar to what we were saying about the Batman, how like the tone does feel quite like from the aughts, rather than now when we kind of want positive culture for dark times. This is more dark culture for dark times.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're going pretty far with this, you know, perhaps aware that dark, violent, sweary animation is something that's been done a few times. They're really going, well, you know, let's see how far we can do. Let's see which bits we can chop people into. There's a real commitment to finding out just how much dismemberment they can fit in.
Yeah, like there's one bit, I think, when someone gets sliced in half by some lasers, and not only is there gore and stuff, but you can kind of see like the joints in their spine and where that's been severed. And I was a bit like, oh, that's a level of detail I didn't need. It's certainly well animated.
Yeah, no, the animation's gorgeous. The main reason why I guess you say this has to be an actual, like, separately promoted show rather than just bonus content for fans of The Boys is that, yeah, they've clearly brought hard into getting really, really nice, really, really well rendered animation of these many, many cartoons about people being chopped apart.
I did like how they got a really strong voice cast as well. I guess because it's Amazon Prime, they've got money, and like The Boys is probably their most high profile, well received show. But like, yeah, they've got like Simon Pegg, Jason Isaacs, Awkwafina. There's quite a lot of high profile voice people in here.
Yeah, considering how short these are. Well, I mean, if anything, maybe the fact that these are quite short makes it easier to recruit these people for it. But yeah, it's definitely well voiced. And we watch these in quite big blocks of like 2 to 4 each, and it does start to wash over you a bit, you know. Well, okay, let's wait and see when the the blood starts flying. But some of them do stand out.
Oh, that sounds like the perfect way to tee up the countdown of our top 3 episodes out of the 8. So, Nick, do you want to kick us off? Choose your third favourite?
I'm going to cheat and slip in an honourable mention first, because yes, the one that almost made it, the one that I was back and forth on up to more or less the last minute before we started recording, was 1 + 1 = 2, which is episode 8, which is one of the only ones which really digs into the actual mythology of the characters in the show. It's an episode of flashing back to like the early days of the Homelander's superhero career, where he goes on what I think is one of his first field missions, and predictably it all goes to shit, because as we've seen many times in the show, the Homelander is mentally unstable. And yeah, I didn't quite put it to the top 3, because ultimately it felt a bit disposable, but it does have a certain, I don't know, it had a certain weight to it, because it was about a character we knew and understood, maybe, so possibly a bit of shorthand cheating there. I did find it a bit more memorable than some of the slightly more straightforward, here are some characters, now they're dead ones.
Randomly, I did also choose an honourable mention, and I will reveal what that is if you choose as one of your top 3. But I had a 1 + 1 = 2 as my third favourite, so it just squeezed into my top 3. And I think because it's one of them that's actually about the actual core characters of The Boys TV show. I like the fact that there wasn't too much about the actual characters we know from the show. They did their own stories, that their own like separate thing. But this one did actually broaden out the world of The Boys, add some more texture and detail, and yeah, was kind of told a story set within that universe, so I did quite like it. I also liked the sort of reference to The Social Network when they go like, drop the Homelander. It's like, wow, it's a good nod to Sorkin.
Yeah, no, I saw that. Okay, so my actual number 3 then, I finally wound up to it, was, and this might well be personal preference, but my actual number 3 was also the third one in the series. This was I'm Your Pusher, the one which actually used the comic version of The Boys. I cannot pretend this was the greatest episode in the series, but I enjoyed the fact they actually took the time to do it. I liked the fact they got Garth Ennis in to write it, and yeah, it did very much capture the ludicrous comic sadism of The Boys comic pretty much to a T. Like, you know, not much attempts to like characterize the scummy drug dealers or the superheroes. The lads turn up and they fuck up a soup, and you know, needlessly sadistic way, and that's just what they do. And then the superheroes cover it up by saying it's something comic-y. It is what it is. It brought in the spirit of the comics into it in a way I enjoyed. I'm aware it was quite disposable, but I still enjoyed it.
I liked Jason Isaacs doing the voice of Butcher. He was very good.
Yeah, I like the fact they acknowledged that Butcher is such a different character that they needed to get someone different in to voice him. And also Simon Pegg playing Huey, because as might have been somewhat obvious in the animation, the comic version of Huey is very heavily modelled off Simon Pegg, or a younger Simon Pegg, I guess. And well, they have acknowledged it in the TV show by getting Simon Pegg in to play the new younger Huey's dad. I would like them actually getting him in to voice comics Huey here as well.
Yeah. I mean, there was a good nod to the more trad version of The Boys than their kind of adaptation that they've done.
Yep, so yeah, as an OG fan, I enjoyed this shout-out. Fair enough, it worked on me. Not enough to get it to number 1, but still.
I enjoyed that one as well, although it didn't make it into my top 3 or was my runner-up. I mean, there wasn't really one that I particularly hated or disliked, so there was some consistently good stuff. My number 2, moving on up, was Nubian versus Nubian, which is the one about a girl whose parents are superheroes and going through a divorce. I like this one a lot. We've had a real sort of story. I think all the ones I've chosen for my top 3 were the ones that felt more like they were a short story or a short film's worth of plot, rather than just one that's basically an extended joke. And I don't know, there was a real sort of tight story told in 15 minutes. It's quite emotional. I also liked that this one had the voice of John DiMaggio, best known as Bender in Futurama and King Zog in Disenchantment. It was good to have him here playing a supervillain called Groundhawk. I mean, he's always a hilarious voice actor.
Yeah, this one did not make my top 3, actually. I guess I just found it to be one of the more disposable ones. I wasn't sure what it was really saying beyond the sort of fairly basic divorce story, but I did enjoy the jokes about the man with hammers for hands, which was the John DiMaggio character.
Yeah, that was... there was some very funny masturbation jokes, obviously, involving the man with hammers for hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that you've had in comics for years, and it's therefore one of the things that I find slightly bizarre that it's now a standard thing to do jokes about on a mainstream TV show. But yeah, hammer-handed supervillain man, fair enough.
What would it actually be like if you had hammers for hands? It would suck, obviously. I did like how also the title is a reference to Kramer versus Kramer, a film from the 70s about divorce. That's not really about superheroes at all, but I guess it's got a cultural chits at this point.
Yeah, I can see there's some solid divorce storyline in there, but I found it quite unmemorable. But yes, my number 2 was Boyd in 3D, the 4th episode. This is the one about a couple who discover Compound V based face cream, and it turns them into ideal versions of themselves, and they decide to become, obviously, an influencer couple. It's quite silly, it's quite over the top and bizarre, but I thought it did interesting things with the concept beyond just using it for gore. The jokes were actually quite funny, and especially considering social media satire is one of the more played out subgenres of the last 10 years, I thought this one still managed to find some good jokes in it. So yeah, I had a good time with this, and the poignancy at the end just about landed for me.
Yeah, no, this is another good one. Again, narrowly missed out on being in the top three. It was actually harder than I expected to choose his top three. I did like this a lot. Again, a good bit of social media satire. It had a good twist at the end. Basically ended again with a reference to Brazil, which is a favourite film of mine. So squeezing that in was quite good. It's got that dark edge to it, but also zany and silly at the same time, which I guess this sort of the meeting of the boys plus animation does very well.
Well, yeah, I felt like, if anything, The Boys, the main TV show, has always got the depressing angle on this kind of covered, so I quite liked that the animation versions were finding ways to be really silly about it.
So, drumroll time. I'm curious to see if we've chosen the same number one.
Based on something you said earlier, I'm not sure how likely that is, but I'll give it a shot.
Well, my number one is John and Soo-hee, which is probably the most moving and saddest of them, about a man whose wife is dying of cancer, so he steals Compound V and gives it to her, and obviously it's a classic, if you cheat death, you'll get more than you bargained for story. But it's, again, it's one of those ones where it's very short, like they're all like 14, 15 minutes, but it packs a lot in and of a convincing emotional arc. It's an emotional story about, you can see how this old man is so cut up he can't lose his wife that he would do something extreme to save her. I thought it was just a really sweet, tight, emotional story that I really enjoyed.
No, this wasn't my number one, nor is it anywhere in my top three. I thought it was okay, but I thought again, it just seemed kind of tropey and didn't really, I don't know. I found it harder to buy into the emotion once the massive weird blob turned up. It was a strange story for me. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood, I'm not sure. But yeah, this one didn't entirely land for me. My number one, which, as I say, based on what you said about doing more than just being silly earlier, I wasn't sure how high this one would rate for you. My number one is, what was, I believe, the 5th episode? Yes, BFFs, which was the one written by Awkwafina, in which a woman befriends a talking shit.
Well, this was my honourable mention, actually.
It's a very honourable episode.
It narrowly missed out on being in the top three. I clearly had the 4 I wanted to mention. I couldn't decide which of the 3 was going to be, so I had to put honourable mention to BFF. There's kind of 3 broad types of episodes. There's ones that are in the continuity, like 1 + 1 = 2. There's ones that are a sort of what-if story, like the Boyd in 3D. And there's ones that are just basically a joke. And this one is the kind of, I think, the best execution of the joke concept here.
Actually, the animation did play into my win here as much as the writing, because I thought the animation in this was hilarious and delightful. I thought the massive, silly anime expressions and huge, swinging, ludicrous emotions on their faces, and the ridiculous animation of the talking poos, and yeah, when the Deep shows up, is also handled with all the dignity he usually gets on this franchise. Yeah, no, I just found this particularly entertaining and delightful. I was just in the mood for full joke, to be honest.
Yeah, very funny. And Awkwafina is hilarious, both here writing and doing voice acting. So yeah, I've always got time for her stuff.
Yeah, and the weird, dead straight seriousness with which they take the emotion of this woman befriending this poo. It's all very good. It's what I want from my boys' content. Alright,
so that's quite a wide variety of stuff. I think it reflects well on the show that we've chosen different ones. It means they're all good. There's a wide variety, and we found something positive to say about pretty much all of them.
Yeah, no, as I say, they've definitely put a lot of budget and effort into this. They've got some high-profile animators, and yeah, it's paid off. If you like The Boys, then it's worth watching this, something to pass the time till the new series in June, I want to say, when The Boys returns for its 3rd outing.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. So, yeah, that's definitely going to be a big event, as it's, probably Amazon's most successful high-profile show.
Yeah, I really liked Season 2. I think it landed somewhere in the top 2 or 3 of my shows of that year. I thought, somewhat to my surprise, been one of the best superhero shows of recent years, and these are good too. And that was it for this fortnight. Thank you very much for listening. If you have enjoyed the Moderate Fantasy Violence experience, then you can find more at moderatefantasyviolence.com, including articles, past episodes, and anything else we could dredge up. And if all of that appeals to you, you can then go to your podcast app of choice and leave us a nice 5-star review. Thank you very much.
You can also get more from us on Twitter, where we are at MFV Podcast, or find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. You can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Alistair J.R. Ball, or you can get more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
And you can hear more from me on Twitter at NickMB, where primarily, to be honest, it's mostly promotion for my currently running Kickstarter for the Death of a Necromancer graphic novel, which is, of course, my exciting, longer than usual comic story about the rise of black magic in a small English town. This is running for another 2 weeks from the launch day of this MFV episode. In fact, it will be finishing on the day we drop the next one. So you'll have relatively little time to get to it after the next episode comes out, so I'd recommend you back it now. Thank you very much. You can find the link in the show notes or on the website or about 4 times a day on my Twitter feed.
And I've backed it, and I'm very excited to read the graphic novel, so it's got the MFV seal of approval.
Yep, and if anyone else wants to back it, please get involved. And yes, in that episode, which drops on the final day of my Kickstarter, we will be covering Peacemaker and Black Crab. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
When the Aquaman knockoff from The Boys, whose name I've annoyingly momentarily forgotten.
Deep.
The Deep, that's his stupid name, yes.